Let us know in the chat, because then I know when I can get started. I see 73 people. Awesome. Sounds great so far. Good. Cool. We're close to 100 people now, so let's use the time efficiently because we have a lot to cover today. First of all, welcome everyone. We're live now. We're going to get started. Thank you for being here. Today we will be discussing customer success and the 3 deadliest challenges of scaling in a webinar that we're hosting together with Planet. So first of all, wanted to quickly note that I know that we went a little bit overboard with a certain nautical theme. So if that has led you to expect that this is a webinar about fishing or marine biology or something, it really is not. But we'll try to make it interesting for you either way. Also, this is the final pun about anything related to the sea, I think. So yeah, also be certain about that. And secondly, why we're here. So maybe a little bit of background. We did a study with PlanHat a couple of months ago to gauge the problems of scaling a customer success team and budget and tooling, etc. And we uncovered a range of issues and problems, but also interesting data points in the responses to that study. Way more than we will discuss today, but today we will discuss what we think are the 3 biggest or most interesting ones, which are: there is no common structure to customer success yet, I have to say. There are too many channels, and it's a too many channels dilemma. Which ones do you support? Which ones do you leverage? Which ones do you leave? And there is a lack of purpose-built CS tooling. Yeah, so before we intro our panel, just very brief housekeeping. Yes, this is the #1 question always. This webinar will be recorded and it will also be sent right after the session. So if you want to watch it again or send it to someone else, which we obviously love, please do. Second, the Q&A box is open, the chat is open. I will keep an eye out, and also Sophia will keep an eye out on the chat and the Q&A. So we will definitely be able to help you if you have a question. I like to just put those questions into the conversation wherever I can. So feel free to suggest something and I will bring it up. Yeah, and finally, you can also use the chat box, obviously, to engage and do other things and engage in other conversations. Sounds good, right? So then I think before we get started, it's time to introduce our panel. We have a tried and true way of doing so. So I'm going to ask everyone to intro themselves, tell us what they do and who they are, but also what the #1 thing is they would take to a deserted island when they're stuck, which actually is the final reference to a nautical theme, by the way, I just realized. Can I get started with Alex, maybe?
Yes, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. And Remco, let me first express my displeasure to the ban on nautical puns. I had a lot of pre-written material I planned on sharing throughout, so I'll have to improvise. My name is Alex Farmer. I'm currently the Vice President of Customer Success at a company called Cognite, based in Oslo. We are an industrial data ops platform. There, I lead the customer success management team, and I've been there for just over a year now. I'm based in London, though, and one day in the distant future may begin commuting back and forth again, but that's a distant memory somewhere. In terms of deserted island, I'm just gonna I can't steal anybody else's creativity, so I'll be very boring. I'm going to bring a piece of rope because it is so multifunctional, and then I'm really going to think about what I would really bring because I don't think it's a very good answer. So great to be with you.
I think it's very practical, so it's a good start. Christian.
Yeah, hi, pleasure to be here. I work at PlanHat and do a multitude of roles there, but before that was a customer success manager at a company called Tessian based in London. I'm fascinated by the problem of scaling a CS team because when I joined, one of my customers had 3 end users. By the time I left, one of my customers had 3,000 end users. So I really got to live in the trenches as we scaled that. Last part then, what would I take to a desert island? Again, like Alex, sorry, mine may be a little bit simple, but I don't tan particularly well. So I think suntan lotion would be what I have to take.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that one, actually. Factor 50. That's good. Liz, if I can hand it over to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. First of all, big thanks to PlanHat and Insighted for the invitation to join you all today. I'm Liz, and I'm the Director of Customer Success at Close.com. We are the inside sales CRM of choice for startups and SMBs, and we are a fully remote team for 5+ years. So I'm an attorney by education, and I have a background in sales, account management, and customer success at both a few Fortune 500 corporations and at Close, which is a YC-backed startup. And I lead the customer success team, and I've built our team up from the ground from the past 5 years. And I also have to say I enjoy long walks on the beach. And the item, I was definitely saying sunscreen as well. I think I'll have to say maybe a shovel, another multi-use tool. That'll be mine.
Cool. Sounds good. And then Malin.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. So my name is Malin. I work for a company called Meltwater. I'm the VP of Sales and Customer Success there. So I oversee kind of a multifunctional team. I've been with Meltwater, and Meltwater, by the way, is a media intelligence tool. And I've been with Meltwater for over 12 years. I've been there for a really long time. I've had a lot of different roles throughout my time. But I've been very, very focused on making sure that CS is a growth engine throughout my time at Meltwater, and especially here lately. I'm based out of New York City. And I would bring, I'm also like more on the practical side of things, maybe a fishing net, like food is good to have, or maybe I would bring a pen so that you could, because it's going to be very boring, I feel, and pen would be good because you could write things down and
You
I don't know,
still
something
continue.
practical like that. Yeah.
That's good.
While you guys are working away, I'll just be lying on the beach somewhere. So you guys get the fire started, and then I'll come back 6 p.m. once the sun has gone down.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I like a pen because then you could still be writing your CS strategy while you're stuck on a deserted island, get some work done. This is good. Yeah, and then finally, my name is Remco. I'm the VP Marketing at Insided. And what I would take, so I can do two things here. I can join the sort of practical bandwagon and continue to bring something that would make my life at a desert island better. Or I could do the socially more acceptable thing and say that I would bring my family. I don't know. It would also be bad for them, obviously, because they would be stuck. But so it's a selfish thing and a not selfish thing. I don't know, but I think that would be my answer. I think enough about deserted islands. Are you guys ready to get started? Because then I would like to jump in the first topic. So the first topic is no common structure in place for customer success teams. This is the first challenge. We've been talking about customer success for a while. A lot of people actually have been in customer success for years, but apparently we still run into the challenge of there being no one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter build of customer success or a customer success teams, and especially highlighted by companies in varying sizes, varying maturity stages, maybe even varying industries, which is, we think, a problem. But maybe to give the word first to Alex to explain why he agrees with that or disagrees with that. Yeah, Alex, no common structure. What do you think?
Yeah. And thank you for showing us all up. I probably should also bring my family, but that's okay. They won't be watching this, so it's okay. So to completely agree. And not to be too long-winded with the intro, but I've spent, the last 3 organizations I've been with have been different sizes, different structures, and the common thread is, my role has been building customer success teams. So in some ways, I've kind of lived this. And I guess, from my perspective, I feel like it hurts. It creates negative momentum for those CS leaders who are trying to scale, right? Because there is no, I think there's not consensus within our space as customer success leaders. Then therefore, there's certainly not consensus among your manager, your peers, your C-level, right? So at a macro level, I think this really hurts us. It contributes to this age-old challenge of having to justify our presence to the CEO and CFO every budget cycle. If we're lucky enough to be in that conversation, right? And that's something that we sometimes struggle with as kind of as the CS community. Because CS can mean so many different things to so many different organizations, we don't have that kind of one common structure of KPIs or accepted way of demonstrating value. So, obviously, if you come in as a sales leader, you have some very clear KPIs that the board and your C-suite will expect you to hit. But in my experience, in some organizations and other companies that I speak with, it's really on the CS leader to decide first and then justify, right? So that intuition around this is the stuff that I'm going to focus on, and we don't need to question it every budget cycle isn't necessarily there. So that's the challenge at a macro level. At a micro level, I think it drives discord between different teams within the organization, right? So KPIs, because we don't have an intuitive set of KPIs, there's kind of this horse trading and negotiating, especially if we're creating customer success for the first time in an organization. Is this for sales? Is this for account management? Is this for CS? If you're maybe a more commercially focused CS team, or if you're less commercially focused, which by the way, I guess demonstrates this lack of common definition, you can end up playing this kind of jack of all trades, support, stroke training, stroke onboarding, stroke 1 minute left in your day to do anything proactive, right? So I think that's another challenge. And, you know, I guess my last thought here, and maybe call to action to try and drive some change amongst the CS leadership community, is I still feel, you know, yes, it's a relatively new function, but we find ourselves talking a lot about CS is not support and CS is not account management, and this kind of echo chamber of things that we're not keeps circling around. And I think, you know, I'd like to hear more, and I'm sure we will get into it today, kind of from the coal face. What have we actually done? The tactical been there, done that. Examples of execution and customer success, I feel, is somewhat missing from our discourse, which makes this problem even more acute.
Okay, I like that. So do you think this also has something to do with, like, is it then a different perspective from which you start when you create a customer success team? Because I feel like sometimes we also still sort of have to get into the support is not customer success or the other way around discussion, because it has something to do with where do companies start out from, and that there maybe is a mismatch with companies that have already surpassed that stage or something, which maybe clouds the conversation. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in some ways, I think what you're saying is it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If it's not if it's a new function, we have to say what we are before we say what we are. I mean, I guess to get, you know, really tactical, I think one of the things that would help advance our function is by showing and not telling. And what I mean by that, you know, when I speak to organizations that are starting their first CS function, I find sometimes the intuition is to change the name of the onboarding support training person to customer success, and they'll kind of do all the non-commercial stuff. And then very, you know, but I think there's a lack of understanding of the customer point of view, especially with an executive sponsor that maybe speaks to you and your organization 1% of their month, right? That if you handle a support case yourself as a CSM, that executive sponsor in that moment in time pigeonholes you into that space, right? So I guess, you know, from my perspective, there's also a need to when you're setting up your, you know, scaling your customer success team sooner than you think you need, separating the reactive and proactive, so that you're in every touch point showing that customer what you're about, instead of just telling them but then showing them you're about something else, right? So being really intentional, almost theoretical about it in setting up the function, and maybe before you feel you need a true CSM function, kind of pulling the trigger to separate those two motions out, the reactive inbound and the proactive outbound. I've found organizations kind of get better success in that way, to answer your question.
So sort of like a philosophy when you start out or something like that.
Well, I think yes. And then I would also say, you know, it's hard to establish that proactive momentum, right? So, you know, you kind of expect to split the team out and get a customer success function kind of up and running as soon as possible. But getting that value layer reestablished when you haven't established it from day one is really hard. And I won't get into my life history, but I spent 4.5 years at a company called Fairsail, and I was our first CSM. And I was pretty technical. I was a former implementation consultant. And I spent the first year being our only CSM doing what I called the red account scramble, right? Which is picking 20 red accounts, going in, configuring my way out of the problem and moving on to the next set of red accounts. But then again, to that phrase that I will overuse, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You're accepting that those red accounts exist and being really reactive. So we had to make a really conscious choice to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and say, those issues, that's for support, that's for implementation. You need to pay for that stuff that we gave you previously. And if we hadn't have done that early on in our growth, we would have had set the expectation with our customer in an almost irreversible way, So not just theoretical, but or philosophical, but I think quite practical as well.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Thanks for that. So maybe quickly moving this over to Liz, because I know you also wanted to get into this from like a philosophy and maybe even company priority kind of feel.
Yeah, I hope everyone's heads are nodding with what Alex just said, because I felt like I was a bobblehead in that conversation there. I definitely agree. I think we get into trouble, or we have complexity, because CS is a discipline, a philosophy, and it's an organization, right? So it comes down to, is the company viewing CS in that way? Are you working at a company where it's only an organization, but the customer-centric philosophy isn't there yet, or isn't, at a top-down level? Has the company organized and centered CS and made it a priority? Because if not, you will struggle when it comes to structure and responsibilities and KPIs. In my own experience, I think what ended up helping to find those clear-cut KPIs for, my team, and I think probably a lot of us, we all look a little bit different when it comes to the CS function. But what helped was working backwards from my company's sort of ultimate goal and looking at how CS could drive the company's overall goal, right? So taking 3 steps back and not just focusing on what are the accepted KPIs for a CS team, looking at churn and looking at expansion and looking at, contraction, but what are the particular things that my team can do to drive the company's, overall vision and overall value? So I think that, goes to strategy first, right? So what does CS mean to your company? Who is your ideal customer? Nail that first and have some level of agreement with the C-suite in your company, and then work backwards from that. What are the KPIs that will help us get there? What are the OKRs then that will drive that strategy forward? I think that type of conversation can be really helpful. Taking a step back of what you already have, and then thinking about how can I connect the dots all the way to the top. And I think that helps us solve a lot of those questions that the C-level may have when we are trying to justify, what is it that you do for the company? Well, let me show you. I can exactly show you how my KPIs drive what we are ultimately, searching for at our company, or what our ultimate goal is. In my own experience, I was the first CSM at my current company. I think I struggled a little bit with what are the correct metrics? How can I have people what we do? And the minute I sort of stumbled into connecting the dots from my team to our ultimate, vision at our company, that's when things became a lot clearer. And I think also when I was able to take on a bit more responsibility within the organization and sort of prove out what the team was doing. So, hopefully that's a little bit of a help for anyone who's at that spot right now as well.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you for that. I think that also sort of speaks to what a lot of people, I think, refer to, like the change management aspect of having to start out with customer success, right? Trying to sort of connect what you're doing and maybe a new approach to what you're doing to what was already there in the organization, or at least already important from a KPI standpoint in the organization. I think there's a lot of talk usually about CS or CSMs just need to be part change managers as well. But I think that's also the difficult thing, right? Because where do you then get started, especially if you're the first, or if you end up in a CS organization that tends to just be a support department, for example, but with the title slapped on. How do you then drive change? Where do you start?
For me, I think Alex brought this up a little bit, that partnership across the different departments internally can be a big factor to make change. So, I'm very lucky. I had a very established, amazing support team. So the support team, like Alex was mentioning, it can be so much easier to come in and have success and customer success when you have a channel that is, does very good work at handling reactive issues at your company. So I think that's one place where you can start, is speak up for the other people on your team or the other people at your company. Be a voice for resources for that support team. That will only have a trickle down effect of helping you become more proactive in your job. So, I think establishing those partnerships across many different levels within your own team can start to really create some change management as well.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So just very quickly looking at this from a different perspective, because I know when we were prepping the session that I think especially Christian and Malin also made a point saying, okay, this is not just a challenge. It's actually also something that can have a positive effect, or at least be like a really cool and positive challenge for someone starting out in CS. So maybe Christian, you can speak to that first, and then Malin can cover what you're missing.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a challenge because you can't just copy the company next to you. You do need to come up with the structure that's right for your customers and your company. And I think what we often see is, if you've not defined it yourself, someone else within your organization has. And that's where you start to hear that echo chamber of, well, not retention, because that's what they became when they didn't kind of take ownership of the opportunity to define their own KPI. So it is definitely a challenge. But if you can drive and show we are a growth engine, not just a kind of cost center to try and keep what we've got, let's not live in fear of losing something, let's go for something bigger. I think that's the difference you can get, and that's the opportunity to make customer success a team that product want to work with, that marketing want to work with, that sales want to work with. So it's about deciding what KPIs you think are important. And for me, when we talk about maturity, I think there's really two big stages of maturity, and that relates back to what I've just said of, is customer success in the organization seen as Malin said earlier, a growth engine? That's the real big maturity difference. There's different like little baby steps within that, but either you are seen as that or you're not, unfortunately. So you've got to be taking that big leap and find the KPIs that align with revenue, align with growth, align with the CEO's objectives.
Awesome. Malin, what did you miss?
Yeah, not so much actually. I'm pretty aligned with Christian, but I agree with him in a way that I think it could be really exciting for a CS leader that there isn't one size fits all. And I also think for a lot of reasons, it's pretty natural that it is that way. Because I think depending on kind of what you're struggling with as a company or in customer success, also depending on what your product does, is an enterprise product, is an SMB product, and so on and so forth, your CS organization is probably going to maybe look a little bit differently. So I think that that's really important to remember as well. And if you compare it to sales, for example, I think the customer success, it's more complex than sales. So that's why sales, you can, have one way kind of fits all more or less. And most SaaS companies, they do sales in a similar way. In CS, I don't know if it will ever look like that, because I also think, specific products has their own specific challenges. Like one product, one company might need to focus a lot on gross retention versus one product is super sticky. They don't have that problem, that they have to focus on a completely other other aspects. And I think, that is a big driver of exactly kind of what the organization should do and what the organization should look like. So in a way, I think it's a little bit natural in that way, but I also echo what everyone else is saying. It's very important, obviously, for CS that the team is never seen as, just a support team as well, but other people went through that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. So if I'm correct, you own customer success and sales, right?
Yeah.
Which is already an interesting combination, which we can talk for an hour about that. But there's this one question from Max Grant, or Grante, I think. I hope I'm doing your last name justice. And he's basically asking, how can we convince internally, or the internal organization, of the importance of customer success when the business is starting and sales seems to be the only priority? And I like this question because I feel like this is also something that a lot of CSMs usually get stuck on. It's like everything's just go to market, it's just marketing, it's just sales. If we're in a board meeting, for example, being a VP of customer success, it's sales screaming for something, higher close rates, better ICP customers, more leads, and marketing screaming for more budget. So how do you mingle with that conversation, being a VP of customer success and feeling like you're not a priority? And maybe for you only, sorry, how do you make this distinction in your job?
Yeah, I think, it's great if you have some kind of data that you can show in the board meeting. Anything that you have where you could prove that, no, actually CS is driving revenue just as much as sales is doing, maybe even more than sales is doing. And a lot of times it's much more cost efficient to just upsell and cross-sell your existing clients than to go out and find a whole new customer. So I think any data that you have that you can really prove that, I think is really, really important. And then also on the other side of the spectrum, and what is probably easier for everyone is to see how much it costs to lose a customer. Say if you have a customer that came on board just a year ago, you're already losing them. What is the cost of that? And that is very easy to, I think, relate to customer success. How, in the customer success team, they do X, Y, Z to make sure that, we don't lose as many customers. Probably a thing that it's usually pretty easy to show data on as well, like dropping or increasing retention rates and dropping churn rates. So I think, that's a good way to go as well. But yeah, I think any data there is.
Yeah, exactly, data. And maybe just to zoom in on the data point a little. So, and this is a question for everyone, feel free to chime in. So does that data always have to be immediately some way or form of showing how you're contributing to a company's bottom line, or how you're reducing churn, or like you just said, for example, what it actually costs to lose a customer? Or are there other things that you can do that are maybe a little bit simpler in the beginning, because you might not even have that data yet, right? Or you might just have become the VP of customer success somewhere and are still waiting for like the first churn results or something like that. How do you then get started by at least having something to show for?
I can jump in briefly. I think there's three things that come to mind from my perspective. And to go back to the original question, where I would start is aligning your kind of KPIs and focus with what greases the wheels and reduces friction for the go-to-market function, right? So how can I make it easier? If our company-wide focus is on, new customer acquisition and go-to-market, because that's the stage we're in, fine. We could try and change that and fight against it, or we could kind of connect what we're focused on and show the improvement. So three concrete things. One, laser focusing in on referenceable accounts and delivering advocacy to reduce customer acquisition costs, I think is quite simple to do, right? Well, simple to track, maybe harder to do, but very easily, in the CS platform or wherever else you store this information, just quickly kind of marking reference accounts. One thing that I have done in the past, really quick time to value, is on an NPS survey. If you give me an 8, 9, or a 10, I will ask you the advocacy question directly on that survey, and that just gives me a huge influx and surge and impact to say, hey, sales teams, hey, sales teams, this is what you should focus on. These are the customers that you should ask for advocacy. So that's one. The second one is around, excuse me, around mapping ideal customer profile fit. That's kind of a, we don't know the total cost of losing a customer, but it's very easy to start influencing sales by saying, of the 5 logos that churned, 4 were bad fit ICP customers. So that's another one that I enjoy. And then the last one's pretty traditional, which is customer success qualified leads. So, how can I track the upsell? I'm the BDR for my existing customers. Whoever closes it, we'll bring in the closers if that's important, but the leads that were generated should be attributed back to our team. And all of that is our leading indicators to improving the go-to-market, per the premise of the original question.
Awesome. Yeah, like Gerda is also saying in the chat, I love the term BDR for existing customers. You're good with these. This is nice. Okay, I'm stealing that one for later. Anyone else have anything to add to this question or anything that we missed? Christian.
Go for it.
I just have a quick one and then I'll leave it over to you. I think maybe also one thing that could be easy to track is just usage, like product usage, for example. Because I think for most, C-suite, they will understand that the more the product is used, usually, the happier the customer is, the less likely to leave and more likely to upsell. So I think that could be a really good one to show, and that's something that's a lot of times very easy for a CS team to affect. I think that's a big part of what the CS team should do.
Yeah, for me, just doubling down on customer success qualified leads. That's how you align with the senior execs objectives, and you can show a CSQL is much cheaper to find, closes much quicker, and then the way you not trick senior leadership, but you're saying, well, the only way we get a CSQL is a happy customer who's rolled out, who's using the product. So if you want more CSQLs, you're going to have to help me achieve those objectives. So you're aligning with what they're after while also making sure you get what you need to make the customers happy.
Awesome, clear. Yeah, so to wrap up, I saw one question, I think from Anonymous, who said, what does BDR mean? It means business development representative, which is way too long. And it's usually a sales function, someone who tries to generate demand, I guess. But in this sense, a CS function, according to Alex, which is good. Yeah, so there's a lot of questions still, which I will try and fit in towards the end, but I do want to pivot towards the second challenge now, as we're already half an hour in, if that's okay. So the second challenge is the many channels dilemma, which means that CSMs are increasingly, I would say, expected to work across many channels, but usually without structure. So basically, I think the general advice is be where your customers are, right? This is at least what I get told in marketing, but I think what also CSMs get told in customer success, et cetera, et cetera. And this can result in a reactive team because you're basically getting feedback from multiples and multiples of channels, and maybe also channels that you haven't really built processes for or haven't really figured out how to support yet, or if they're even officially a support channel or your support team is even looking at them. There's multiple things here. So maybe for Liz in the beginning. So yeah, what do you think about this? And is this an issue, or is this something that you just need to deal with as you're a growing CS team? How do you perceive this?
I think it's definitely an issue. I mean, you can see this all over the industry when you think about the ways that we connect with customers and the ways that we connect with trials. I think sometimes up market is what starts up the funnel is kind of what starts this issue for us, where if a trial came in through a website, through a chat bot, they never talked to sales, they purchased in one way, or they were diverted to sales, sales converted them, and now they're expecting that high touch level because they spoke to sales. So sometimes I think the many channels issue can actually start obviously prior to CS. And we see that so much, right? CS often gets the downstream impact of decisions that are made on the upward part of the funnel. I think, again, stepping back, it's a little bit about focusing in on the problems or issues that the customer is experiencing and thinking through, our goal here isn't to have a bunch of channels for a customer to receive help, but it's to have customers need help less and less often. It's meta if you think about it. We have job security because customers have problems or issues, or they don't know how to use something. And the more we solve for that, the less a company needs customer success, right? But that is the ultimate goal, is to have the customers be asking for help less and less often. So a good CS team should also always be thinking about, why does this customer even need my help in this moment? What could we have done differently upstream so that I would not be needed to answer this question? So I think we have to think about that. And that type of thinking often puts some pressure on other areas of the organization and ask them to take their own responsibility for certain things. So it could be that support didn't solve a problem adequately, or sales sold to the wrong person, or a product released a feature that's really complex and our customers don't know how to use it. And that all comes, downstream to the CS team. So I think it's, thinking about those patterns, where are we seeing the issues and trends, and can we get ahead of it? So instead of waiting for that problem to come in through that chat, can we solve for that in a different way? And ultimately, I think that points to CS having a seat at the table, having the same authority as other major decision makers in the company, so that they can demonstrate the trends and the patterns and customers' requests and push, every department to solve for those, not just, CS in a reactive way. Again, as an organization gets bigger, I think it can help to specialize within the CS team to be able to spot those trends and patterns. So someone in onboarding is going to see a different set of issues and questions than, say, someone who has a technical implementation focus. So I think that's where specialization can help us. not by having more people to man more channels, but for having more people to sort through the data and trends and then deliver that information in a way that helps problem solve upstream.
Awesome. I think that really sets the stage nicely. Anyone else who wants to contribute to this? Maybe Christian?
Yeah, definitely. So I think often why this is a challenge is particularly scaling a CS team is really early on. You don't necessarily have access to data usage. So what do you care about? Being able to speak to the customer as frequently as possible, because that's the best read you have on the health of the account. What are they saying? What's the CSM reporting back? As you scale and get more tech that allows you to see more usage, allows you to read the health in other ways, you add new tools and new interaction methods, but you never deprecate the old ones. So maybe you had a Slack channel for the first 20 customers, or the head of CS, because they were the first CSM, gave their mobile number to the first 30 customers because they wanted to, I can't have a churn. I need to make sure we stay properly, we don't lose anyone. And you've added more tech, you've added more interaction, but you've never gotten rid of the old ones. And I think it comes from this psychology of, but that would be making the experience worse for the customer. But if you're putting the right tools in place to get the customer's job done, the new tool you add should mean that that old process is actually a worse process. And if you can communicate that to the customer, you'll move the customers along very happily. The most important thing is when you add something, probably take something away, just because otherwise you're going to do it 3-6 months too late when you've had an account churn because they sent in a request in a channel no one looks at anymore.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. So what I want to get into with this too many channels thing, I really liked what I think Liz said in the beginning, is that the ultimate goal is to make sure that customers either need help less. So everything's super clear. Your onboarding was super clear. Maybe your product is just amazing to use and no one really has any questions about it in an ideal world. So I think that's the ultimate goal. That's the number one thing. But I feel like also sometimes it's about providing a way to actually solve problems with least friction. And one way of doing that is actually just saying, okay, look, our customers are here, they're using these channels, so we're using these channels. That's one, but that can basically end you up with like 15 channels or something like that. Or you can actually set out to build like a logical, frictionless path, which you actually direct customers to, which makes it a lot easier, for example, for them to handle their own questions, self-serve a little, or maybe get in touch with your organization, whether it's whenever it's required. What do you think? What should you do? Maybe Malin.
Yeah, I think what you said, kind of creating a path towards where you push your customers to go, is the most realistic thing if you want to scale, right? Because it might be very easy when you're small to like Liz said, you can give them your phone number or your cell phone number or whatnot, but that doesn't work as you scale. So I think that you need to figure that out as you scale, and you could also have, what we have different channels for different segments, right? So the higher paying customers, they maybe get access to Slack, but our smallest clients, they don't. We want to push them to self-serve as much as possible. We have videos, we have a help center for them and whatnot. And I think as you scale, that's pretty important, because it's not scalable, I don't think, to have any channel where the customer is to offer support in that channel.
I actually have a question for all of you. What happens when you offer a customer one level of support and their revenue decreases or they contract substantially, and now they fall into a different bucket? How do you handle the communication, from high touch to maybe low touch or tech touch? Like, I think this is a common struggle. I hear this a lot in industry groups. How do you communicate to that to the customer without absolutely making that customer feel, lesser than another customer?
Yeah, I feel like I do this on almost every webinar these days, which is turning out to be a problem. But I feel like I have to quote Brian LaFile again, because I did a webinar with him months ago, and basically he said, and obviously there were a few like situations that we discussed. So whenever a customer is not really doing well and you basically move them towards a more high touch model, that's obviously fine, right? Because your CSMs get involved and human touch, blah, 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 that's cool. But the other way around, I feel like you can only do that when you actually have data and sentiment and all those kinds of things to show that they're doing well and they're using your product well and the account is super healthy and maybe they're advocates for you. And he then suggested that you don't just move people to like a new model or a self-service model, basically take their CSM away, but you graduate them to a self-service model. Meaning that you literally tell your customer that, look, hey, you're doing so well with our solution. Results are off the charts. We've made, at least completed, succeeded, maybe surpassed the last few success plans that we put together. You don't need me or us as a direct CSM anymore. You can, here are 2 or 3 channels, which obviously need to be good and efficient. And you can just do that, which will save you time, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, you're smart enough to do it yourself now, which I thought was brilliant, but don't know what everyone else has to say about this.
I think also that there's an opportunity, if you have a community or, an academy, you can throw badges and gamify the graduation in a positive way. And I've seen that actually not just kind of improve your cost, as a company, but actually turn customers into advocates who want to brag about their graduation, right? So it's kind of a win-win or a force multiplier, which is great. I was also just going to quickly contribute that if you have if your tiers are commercialized, and this is not a forum to talk about commercializing customer success, that probably deserves its own session, but my point being, what I'm used to in other organizations, you have a standard offering and a premier offering. And that's the premier support or premier success offering. You'll discount quite a bit as kind of the gimme to get a deal over the line, which means the customer's not actually paying that much for it anyway. But if you have a commercial lever to pull to say, not only are you graduating now to standard support, but I can also save you a little bit of money, or I can take the money you're spending and give you more licenses or a new feature you'll actually get value from. You have kind of a triple win incentive to get the customer focused in a different direction as well.
Awesome. There's a question from Marion. She says, we have different channels depending on the user type or request type at the client, but it creates a lot of confusion. Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, actually, without knowing all the details, one of the things that my experience is in high touch customer success, but I'm a big kind of advocate for using community and high touch for exactly that purpose. Community can kind of get pigeonholed as a case deflection place. And I think it's far from that, right? It's really kind of your digital experience for the customer that's community first. And one of the things that we focused on at a previous organization was actually kind of almost making the community or that place the customer is trained to go persona based, right? So actually targeting, if you're an executive sponsor, I want you to see these things. Your front cover of the community or this portal that we have for you will show something different to if you're maybe a super user, where it may be more case deflecty. That's a new word. You can coin that term, case deflecty, with the Y. So actually kind of doing that micro targeting has been really effective. And then you can, get even more nerdy about it and connect customer health to the layout as well, right? So if you're in, a green account that looks prime for an upsell, I may target you with some more kind of use case or advocacy based content, versus if you're a red account and you're the super user, it's going to be really laser focused on the things that you're struggling with, right? So actually kind of having this, and the point I was going to make earlier is, actually one channel for me is much more efficient because the customer experience is easier. Because again, breaking through the noise of the many different things that executive sponsor or day-to-day user is dealing with, they may go to Slack and that's the only thing they remember, or they could go to the kind of all-in-one portal and make that the only thing they remember, and it's more beneficial for them in the long run. But it's also more beneficial for the organization because you can look at their overall engagement with your digital channels in a much more data-driven way as well.
Yeah, I fully agree. I also love that you reference the customer experience there, because I feel like that's often overlooked. I mean, it's one thing to have 8 channels, staff them, and do support on them really well. But it's also good to look at it from a different way. So if you have, like Alex just said, one single location that basically houses all of the Q&A, educational content, success materials, I don't know, trainings, maybe even onboarding materials, those kinds of things. It's also easier for customers to eventually find them and find them by themselves without interference or help from your customer success team or anyone else at the company, which I do think eventually is a win-win. Case deflecty. Yeah, there we go. There's so many new things coming out of this webinar already. I love this. So looking at the time, I do want to transition and give 10 minutes to the final subject, and then also spend 5 on some good questions that I've seen so far. And as we're already speaking about the experience and how you can actually help your customers have a better one, I think it's good to move to the third challenge. So to remind everyone, the third challenge is the lack of CS-centric tools, or I would even say the lack of purpose-built tooling for customer success teams, which means that according to our results, but also definitely according to my own feeling, CSMs are currently forced to rely on platforms that are built for other teams, other use cases, maybe even in other times and times that are no longer relevant in terms of certain features and workflows, etc., which is making it more difficult for them to get the insights they need, but also for them to scale a customer success team efficiently with the help of certain tooling. So maybe starting with Christian and looking at the question. So this challenge, lack of customer success or purpose-built tools for customer success, how have you experienced this? Can you name a tool that you've been using in the past with a CS fashion that wasn't really fit for it in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm at PlanHat, so I won't throw any mud across the aisle. But one of the problems I definitely experienced was we had a health score that would tell you how many open support tickets, but because of the silo nature of how most tools approach these problems, I couldn't see what those tickets were about. So if I'm going to that customer meeting and I would need to know what it's about, I have to email support. Support then send on a Zendesk ticket. I don't know if you've ever responded to a Zendesk ticket, but it goes back to the customer as well. So we had more than one instance where that occurred. And you also, because being a CSM is so reactive, unfortunately, there are times when just before you go into the meeting, you double check the health score, you see there's a ticket. You don't have time to find out what's gone on there. So you turn up to the customer meeting, not knowing exactly what the problem is. You're meant to be the person who does know the problem. So you're a little bit reticent to admit that. And then who's getting the worst experience there? The customer. So I think, and the reason I joined PlanHat is because of breaking down that silo, making sure everyone can rally around the customer. That's how you do it.
Sounds awful. Thanks for that. So maybe one more example, Liz.
I think I could talk about all kinds of examples where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing when you show up in a customer meeting, and it's very cringy, I guess, is the best way to talk about that. I think too here we often see, again, like we talked about earlier, the focus is often at the top of the funnel, right? With marketing and sales who have maybe already proven out that they need certain platforms and they need certain data. So CS is working with marketing data or sales data, which isn't customer data. So also the data we have there is trailing. It's from when that customer joined, and then we stopped maybe updating what they're up to or what their team size is now, or what industry they're in. Maybe they made a pivot. It's almost as if that data, the minute they become a customer in some organizations, we stop updating it. And then it's trailing. It's not predictive. If the goal of a CS team, again, is to solve problems and make it so that their company doesn't need a CS team, right, to be proactive, we have to be looking at leading indicators of churn in order to predict, what's going to happen to that account. We can't be looking at this information that, talks about what happened when they became a customer or what happens at the end of what happens at the moment of churn. We have to have those key milestones, those key indicators across the customer journey. So I definitely think that is absolutely necessary. And it comes from both a human interaction with CS teams. We know that, like Christian was saying, that many channels, we're only doing that because we want to talk to our customers because we get such valuable data that way. but we also need it, from human interaction and leveraging patterns and data points and signals so that we can make better decisions to help our customers. So you need a tool that captures both those types of insights.
Yeah, I just want to throw on top of that the amount of companies I've spoken to that get a monthly data dump of customer usage. So good luck being proactive with that. Go on, off you go.
Okay. So as we're on the subject of data already, I know Alex is just waiting to go off on data and how it's used within companies. So Alex, you have a few minutes.
All right, start the timer. Yeah, no, this one really triggers me and kind of gets my goat, so to speak. So this concept of data democratization, I don't feel like we don't talk about enough in customer success, right? Customer success, we're meant to kind of, be responsible for, I kind of think of it as a T, right? Customer success, you focus on your individual department, but you also have to kind of get above your little, departmental silo and look across other departments where there's data and possibly friction, because it's ultimately going to blow back on you. Needing to expand customers, make them advocates, and close renewals, right? So this, I think the irony is we don't really apply our CS adoption playbook to our own system procurement, right? The product team might want to get a feature, a product ideation module that has 110% of the bells and whistles, but 0% of data availability, right? So I very much come down on the side of a single platform or a highly integratable or integration ready platforms that maybe have 70% of the functional capability are far superior, because we can do so much more with that capability as an organization in the interest of the customer, right? And that, I think is a really a big challenge that I would like to see maybe more consensus around when it comes to procuring tools that ultimately touch the customer, right? So I think this idea of data democratization is a real challenge. Just an example, if your marketing automation tool doesn't connect to your central source of contacts, which doesn't connect to your CS platform, but you want to look at how often your executive sponsor persona is opening your marketing emails and attending your webinars, you've got a real challenge that either requires you to invest in a bunch of headcount or kind of some data warehouse over the top of your solutions if you don't think about those decisions during the procurement process and actually kind of map almost the data journey from your customer, right? And I think, similarly, product just another example that I've struggled with in the past is around this product ideation tool example that I mentioned, where it could have all the functionality to create this beautiful roadmap presentation that you're going to replace in the QBR deck anyway to simplify because it's too complicated. That's great, and that makes the product team's job easier. But if it doesn't have the ability to integrate customer health scores and revenue potential and other kind of CS related insights, then the product decisions you as a company are making are probably not as customer centric as they need to be. And ultimately, which would you choose, right? Customer centric product development or a fancy roadmap, right? And ultimately, product teams are going to maybe lean on the side of fancy roadmaps because that's in their wheelhouse. But getting people to think outside in about the customer need more generally with the tools that they're procuring is really important. And I know I'm probably, stopwatch is probably going off, but the last thing I would say here, Remco, is this idea. I think I find it very ironic, and I like tools, I like technology, so I take most. There's any BDRs on this call, earmuffs, please. I take most demos because I like to see what's out there, but I think it's really ironic that there's a lot of kind of purpose-built platforms out there for customer success that the license model is focused on, we're going to put customers at the heart of your organization, but we're not going to replace your CRM, and you need to pay per user of our platform, right? And that to me is just a super kind of legacy antiquated way of using CS tools, because you're putting a cost impediment to putting the customer at the center, right? Which is why kind of in the market today, there's a lot of plug on top of solutions that are popping up that are, automate your QBR or, just calculate customer health scores, because this kind of battle between CS platform and CRM and having license models that kind of conflict with each other is just not an efficient way for businesses to kind of use their tech stack in a customer centric way. So that's a lot of thoughts and words. And yes, as promised, I'm very passionate about this topic. Thank you for the floor, Remco.
You were definitely preaching. I love it. So maybe finally, quick question from Alan. So what's your single source of truth at Meltwater?
I mean, we use Planhat, right? We haven't actually used it for that long. So I've been in CS for many years with no CS tools. So I can, for me, it's very easy to look at a before and an after. I agree with everything that Alex said. It's so valuable for you in the CS organizations, but even more valuable for people that are not in CS to be able to access all this data, just for the strategy for the company. I think it's just super valuable. So that's what I use, and it's I can't even explain how helpful it is.
Awesome. I should have done my homework better. So maybe some audience questions to finalize, because we're already close to time. Question from Mariah. Would you comp your CS team on the number of CS qualified leads or only on closed upsells and expansion?
I mentioned it, so I'll give a quick answer. It depends on, I guess it really kind of depends on what your CSMs are ultimately there to do. My opinion is copying on the leading indicator of upsell is important, because in the organization I work for today, we're quite a complex product, long procurement cycles, and a lot of expansion potential. So we, and super high touch, right? So we have sales execs that are responsible for upsell, closing, cross-sell, and upsell, and CS responsible for CS qualified leads. So we want to generate as many as possible, and we want them to close as many as possible. And we have the data to see which is happening. It's just like MQLs and close won deals, right? So that's my short answer. I would also say, to remove this idea of ownership and conflict, one thing that's worked really well for us is we comp individually on CSQS generated and closed won, but there's also a shared bonus pool on expansion across our customers. So wherever you contribute to that journey, you have skin in the game to win. And we have seen just the disappearance of this territorialism of, this is my lead, go away, and this is my lead, go away, which can really plague this really important team effort of generating leads and then closing them.
I think that's awesome. So I hope you took notes. Then we have Melissa, who's saying, or asking even, how do you prove the value of the CX team in the organization when churn is high due to factors outside of CX's control? Example given, poor product sales or implementation.
I can take this one. This might be controversial, but I'm a big believer in not having churn be a KPI that your team is paid commission on. Churn is something that a success team should keep track of or should own the data around it, but it is absolutely demoralizing if you are a CSM and you cannot impact that churn based on factors outside of your control. I see this especially in SMB startups. Business practices or small companies face all kinds of things. They could go out of business. How is a CS person supposed to keep a company in business, right? So I think instead pushing growth or expansion as a key indicator or something you factor commission on can be generally a lot better. It's better for your team as a whole, and ultimately, again, it connects to a growth goal. We keep talking about this idea of CS as a growth engine. Company's ultimate goal is likely to grow their revenue. So, make all those goals line up to hit that ultimate goal for the company. I think is a much better practice.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's a really good answer. So I hope that helps, Melissa. And then I'm just squeezing one more in because we can. So it's from Ryan, and I'm rephrasing the question a little bit, but should you expect higher churn on customers that, for example, haven't purchased like a broader or higher support package or something like that, for at least those of you that have the option to purchase basically a dedicated CSM? Let's put it like that. Or should you not expect a higher churn rate by default?
I don't think that you necessarily need to. We see that with our lower paying segments that are more, they're not on a full tech touch, but they're close to there, and the churn isn't always higher on those customers, just because I think we've spent a lot of time really building up you know, building up their experience and help center and all those things. And now I think it's at a point where it's working really well. So we don't actually see necessarily higher churn on that customer, but I think it depends on product and so on and so forth too.
Yeah, agreed. I definitely agree. So guys, we're out of time, unfortunately. There's a bunch more questions, so I do want to let everyone know already that I'll try and team up with the PlanHat team to see how we can get those answered after the webinar. So have a look out for that. Panel and everyone on the panel, thank you very much for joining and spending your time with us and also sharing your wisdom. This has been awesome. And then especially also to everyone that signed up and joined. You guys rock, and audience engagement in the chat actually also was super fun to see. Thank you, and hopefully speak to you guys soon.